At 2:21 a.m., I stared at a message from an unknown number on my phone. I'm Dennis's next wife. I had sensed something off about Dennis these past few days. I just didn't expect the truth to land this soon. I paused only for a second, about to type a reply. But before I could tap a single key, the sender blew up my phone. A flood of photos came in, one after another, as if she were sitting there with her thumb poised over the send button, just waiting for my reaction. The notification chime kept going off, ding. I glanced at Angela sleeping peacefully beside me and scrambled to hit mute. 70. There were 70 photos in total. Dinner dates. Movie nights. Weekend getaways. Strolls down the street holding hands. Picture after picture of them playing house like some twisted highlight reel. These weren't just receipts of an affair. They were a slap in the face, proof of how effortlessly a man's heart can wander. All those tender moments that once felt like mine, they were never mine alone. Dennis never really loved me. He never really loved her either. The only person Dennis ever truly loved was Dennis. I don't know if the timing was intentional or just cruel coincidence. But today marked 7 years since Dennis and I got married. To say I wasn't heartbroken or angry would be a lie. 7 years. 7 years of loving him, building this home, giving everything I had. No. That home is rotting. Rotting from the inside out, so foul it turns the stomach, so foul it brings tears to your eyes. I opened every single photo. Patiently. One by one. Downloaded the originals. Saved them all. One of them was particularly interesting. I forwarded that one to a good friend of mine. She's a lawyer. When evidence lands in your lap, you don't just delete it. You put it to work. Just as I finished saving the last photo, Dennis walked through the front door. The sound startled our daughter Angela. She stirred and let out a soft whimper. I gently patted her back to soothe her. Lucy. Dennis called out my name, loud, sharp, slicing through the silence of the night. I tucked Angela back in and stepped into the hallway. The man standing before me, bloated, sweaty, reeking of cologne and booze, was unrecognizable. 7 years ago he was lean and broad-shouldered with clean lines and a sharp jaw. Not movie star handsome but solid. Confident. Alive. Well, what are you just standing there for? He stripped off his clothes right there in the hallway, clothes that reeked of another woman's perfume and cheap whiskey, and tossed them onto the floor before stumbling into the shower, buck naked. I bent down to pick up the pile. Even glancing at him made my stomach turn. When he was done, he collapsed onto the bed and began snoring so loudly it shook the walls. I returned to Angela's room and slipped under the covers next to her. This was the 3rd year we'd been sleeping in separate rooms. When Angela was born, Dennis started finding excuses. Too tired, too stressed, needed better sleep. I didn't push back. I thought I was being understanding. My mom had warned me. Couples sleeping apart? That's the beginning of the end. I laughed her off, called her old-fashioned. Well, turns out she was right. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the pictures the mistress had sent. She was younger than me, vaguely familiar. Not stunning, just soft, girlish. Borderline juvenile. After a moment I texted her back. Lovely to meet you. Her status showed typing. For a long time. But she never sent anything. I waited a few minutes. Then I went to sleep. A mistress's message wasn't worth losing sleep over. The next morning Angela shook me awake, little fingers on my face. I kissed her soft, warm cheeks. Lucy. My mother-in-law Anna had arrived. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror, fluffing her freshly dyed black curls. From the back she looked like a wet poodle dipped in ink. You're just getting up now? The child's probably starving, she muttered theatrically. She reached out to scoop up Angela. Angela ducked away, scampering across the room. I don't want grandma, she declared in her sweet baby voice. This child is so mean. No idea who she gets that temper from. Dennis was an angel when he was her age. He shot me a pointed look. Ridiculous. This woman barely helped raise Angela. Half the time she was around she was scolding or snapping at her. And yet she expected love in return? Normally I'd ignore her. Pretend not to hear, pretend not to care. But not today. Not after the mistress came knocking. Today I was done pretending. The photos made it easy. No more excuses. No more second chances. Anna, could you shut your mouth? I said flatly, chopping meat at the kitchen counter. What did you just say? I slammed the knife down twice hard. then turned around holding the blade and looked her dead in the eye. I said, "Shut your mouth." That morning I made breakfast, just for Angela and me. The old woman clammed up, lips twitching. She waddled off to wake her precious son. "Dennis, breakfast's ready." By the time her darling boy dragged himself out of bed, Angela and I were already out the door. "Where's breakfast?" Dennis bellowed at the gleaming empty pan. I shut the front door behind me without a word. "Mommy, Daddy didn't get any breakfast." "Mommy makes breakfast for Angela. Daddy's mommy can make breakfast for Daddy. Mommy doesn't have to do that anymore." Angela blinked at me, then nodded like she understood. After dropping Angela off at school, I came home to find Dennis and Anna sitting in the living room, both looking like they were about to explode. Anna had powdered her face a ghostly white and painted her lips a garish red. She looked like an aging geisha still clinging to a gig that should have ended a decade ago. My father-in-law must have been one hell of a lucky man. Dennis sat slouched deep into the couch, arms crossed tight over his chest like he thought he was making some kind of power move. The fat spilling out from under his folded arms made him look more like a collapsing beanbag than a man. Did he seriously not feel hot with all that insulation? "Lucy, how could you make breakfast just for yourself?" "That's outrageous," Anna scolded. "I made breakfast for myself and Angela." "And not for Dennis?" "Anna, haven't you always said my cooking is awful?" "Dennis had a business dinner last night. Surely he deserves something better this morning. Since you think my food is inedible, I figured your cooking would be more to his taste." "What is that supposed to mean? Are you saying you don't want this marriage anymore?" Funny how little it took for them to lose their minds. Maybe I'd been too easygoing all these years. Too accommodating. And now that I dared to push back a little, they acted like I'd burned the house down. Dennis tried to glare at me. Back in the day maybe that would have worked. But now. At 6 feet tall and 400 pounds he looked like a human refrigerator. His eyes, those little beads squished into puffy cheeks, barely bigger than raisins. Or rat droppings. "Maybe that's a question you should be asking yourself," I said calmly. Then I pulled out my phone. Selected 2 of the juiciest photos of Dennis and his mistress. And sent them straight to the family group chat. Within seconds, phones started chiming around the room. While I was on the school run, I'd called my best friend Vivian, who conveniently had just arrived. And she wasn't alone. Kathy, the mistress, showed up too. Vivian took one look at her and immediately stepped away, like Kathy's mere presence might infect her with something contagious. "This is my attorney, Vivian. From now on, if you have anything to say it to her." Dennis and Anna looked like they'd been slapped with a brick. While Vivian launched into full-on legal mode, my parents showed up. My dad walked in with red-rimmed eyes, his face twisted with fury. I'd never told him about any of this mess before. And now it was all right there in front of him. "Dennis, listen carefully," Vivian said. "The child stays with Lucy. Child support is $2,000 a month. Marital assets will be split evenly." Dennis sat there like he didn't speak English. Vivian had to repeat herself 3 times. Then a loud voice interrupted her. "Absolutely not." I turned around. It was Dennis's father, the nouveau riche blowhard. Dennis hadn't come from money. The family's fortune was a recent development, and like most men who stumble into wealth, he'd let it go straight to his head. No. That head was about to pop. "Oh." I raised an eyebrow at Vivian. She pulled out a ledger and handed it to me. I flipped through a few pages, then tossed it onto Dennis's lap. "Take a good look before you say another word." The color drained from Dennis's and his father's faces. The ledger held 7 years' worth of business account statements and every transaction from Dennis's personal bank accounts. "Didn't realize you were so calculating," Dennis muttered. "Sign the agreement. We're filing today." "In your dreams. I already transferred all my shares to my sister. The company isn't doing well anyway. We just secured a $230,000 loan from the bank. And I officially resigned from my dad's company last month. I've got nothing now. You want to split something? Fine, split the debt. $115,000 each. You want out? Leave with nothing." I looked at this man, this pathetic, sputtering mess, and then at Kathy, who sat stiffly next to Anna like a debutante at a funeral. "Oh, just 200 grand? That's manageable. But before we settle any of that, I'm collecting everything you spent on her," I said, pointing directly at Kathy. Her face went pale. "March 2022, house purchase, $230,000. April 2022, new car, $15,000. Designer bags, clothes, shoes, another $30,000. Legally, I'm entitled to recover at least half. That's $137,500. After your $115,000 debt share, you still owe me $22,500. Kathy instinctively clutched her stomach. Pregnant. Of course she was. Dennis, baby, I think something's wrong, she whimpered, her voice trembling as she leaned toward him. Dennis looked like he wanted to shake her off and scream some more, but I cut him off. If you don't get moving, your little bundle of joy might not make it. He snapped his head around, shot me a murderous glare, and rushed out the door with Kathy in his arms. Baby, Anna murmured, watching Dennis and Kathy disappear down the driveway. He turned to Lucas. Their eyes met and something silently passed between them, some kind of grim parental truce. Resolve hardened in both their faces. Lucy, Anna started, her tone suddenly syrupy. Look, there's no point in making this divorce ugly. Let's end things peacefully, okay? Dennis is still the father of your child. You're just one woman working part-time, making what? Maybe $4,000 a month? That's not enough to raise a kid. He's gonna need his dad's help, right? Her red lips flapped up and down like a ventriloquist's dummy. I noticed a smear of lipstick on her front tooth. Anna, you've got lipstick on your teeth. She gave a toothy grimace and rubbed at it blindly with a napkin. Still there, I said. Front tooth. Anna flushed and scrubbed again. Lower tooth right in the middle, Vivian added dryly, handing her a tissue from her purse. Anna kept dabbing. Her face was a mess of frustration and fading concealer. There you go. All set, Vivian said with a professional, saccharine smile. Lucy, Anna continued, trying to recover, I'm speaking from experience here. I know what I'm talking about. Sometimes it's best to let things go and move on. Sorry, I said. I missed the part where you said something wise. I was too distracted watching your lipstick migrate across your teeth. Lucy, I helped raise that child all these years. You helped. My voice went sharp. You have some nerve saying that out loud. After I gave birth to Angela, you hired a bargain bin caretaker and took your son on a tropical vacation for a full month. Not a single call. Not a single text. When you finally came back, the caretaker had been napping while Angela screamed with a rash and dirty diapers. Did you lift a finger? Nope. You just moaned about your aching back and how you couldn't see or hear properly. When my maternity leave ended, you hired some clueless daytime temp to help. You know what you did? You spent your days at the spa. Angela got a 102 fever and the sitter panicked, called me in tears and quit on the spot. After that, Angela was with me. Always. Until preschool. I turned to my mother in disbelief. She was red-faced, fists clenched. This was a woman I had never seen like this before. Growing up, my mom had been the picture of quiet endurance. Whenever I cried to her about Dennis, she'd sigh and whisper things like, "That's marriage. We all go through it." Or worse. "He's still your child's father." That kind of resignation had pushed me further and further away. But now here she was standing up, spitting truth. Lucas opened his mouth to say something, but his phone rang. The volume was so loud it echoed across the room. Even I could hear Dennis's voice through the speaker. Kathy was 4 months pregnant. The baby was measuring small, so she needed bed rest. They were told it was a boy. Anna started moving toward the door. Lucas grabbed her wrist and held her in place. At least the old man had a shred of dignity left. "You're not going to the hospital?" I asked mockingly. "Your son's broke. Someone's gotta pay the bills." Lucas winced. Then he stood, grabbed his coat and shuffled out the door with Anna in tow. Dennis had played the rich kid card for years, but the truth was he never had any real money of his own. He was always reaching into Daddy's pocket. I'd covered more household expenses than they ever acknowledged. The money he used to spoil his mistress? No way Lucas hadn't known. Ever since I gave birth to Angela, they'd been pushing me to have another baby. Now that I saw them for who they really were, parasites and pearls, I knew. That second baby? Never happening. This marriage? It was already over. "Lucy, get the divorce. I won't try to talk you out of it this time, just do it. Leave him." My mother wrapped me in a tight hug, her eyes rimmed red. My father stood silent beside us, his hands clenched, his face unreadable. "I called a moving company. I was done here. Lucy, I revised the divorce agreement, Vivian said, handing over the document while I was still on the phone. Also, look at this. He pulled out a photograph. It was from last year's scholarship award ceremony hosted by Dennis's company. Kathy was in the background, standing just behind him, her eyes glued to his profile like he was the sun. She was his scholarship student, Vivian said quietly. I stared at the photo for a second, then smiled. Let's go to the university. Dad, Mom, I turned to them, help me pack everything. Angela's things. My jewelry. If it can be carried, take it with us. Are you okay? Vivian asked gently, her eyes scanning my face. I'm fine, I replied with a small smile. And this time I meant it. There was a time I wasn't. The first time I pulled a condom out of his jacket pocket, I nearly collapsed. I told myself it was just carelessness. That the spark was gone because we were an old married couple. That he still loved us. That this was normal. That people didn't live in passion every day. I kept lying to myself, until the lies dried up. He had someone else. He'd had someone else for a long time. I used to lie awake for hours, replaying every sweet memory and overlaying them with flashes of betrayal. There were nights I stood outside his bedroom door with a knife, shaking, imagining what it would take to make him pay. He destroyed me. He destroyed this home. He took my warmth, my belief in love, my ability to trust. And eventually the pain became dull. The wound closed up, not healed, just scarred over. Ugly. But no longer bleeding. What are we doing at the university? Vivian asked cautiously as we drove. I want to meet the faculty. I'm Dennis's wife, right? I should have the right to see how his scholarship students are doing. Vivian gave me a look. 1 part admiration, 2 parts worry. I promise I'm fine. I'm not going to lose it. My anger is a weapon now, not something that eats me alive. I took the stack of papers from her. There was Kathy again. Frozen in time, holding a certificate, beaming with confidence and ambition. A girl in her prime. She reminded me of me. Back in college I'd had that same spark. That same blind belief that the world would treat me fairly if I worked hard and loved purely. The campus was teeming with students, bursting with life and noise and that unmistakable scent of youth. Vivian, remember when we used to laugh like that? I asked, nodding toward 2 girls walking ahead of us, locked arm in arm, giggling about something only they understood. Vivian smiled. Yeah. We were always stuck together. You with your red baseball jackets, 5 of the exact same kind. And you in those oversized flannel shirts, I laughed. The sound of our laughter faded into a quiet ache. I watched those girls disappear down the path and felt something twist inside me. Vivian, I whispered, I can't go back. The 2 girls rounded a corner and vanished. Just like the version of me I used to be. And no matter how much I longed for her, she was gone. Vivian gave my arm a soft pat. We had arrived. We explained our purpose clearly, and before long, we were ushered into an office to meet with the professor in charge of the scholarship program. Professor Jones, we just wanted to understand more about the current status of the scholarship students, I said, keeping my tone warm but measured. We're also considering increasing the funding amount, so we'd like to get a clearer picture of how the students are doing. This is our attorney, Vivian. If we decide to draft a new agreement, she'll be assisting us with the legal work. Hope you don't mind. Of course not. Professor Jones beamed. That's very thoughtful. He eagerly pulled out several thick files, stacking them on the desk, his energy bubbling over as he spoke about the students with pride. Here, take a look. Kathy, for example, is an incredibly hardworking young woman. She's one of the top students in the literature department and has even represented the university in competitions. These are her award certificates. She also works part-time in the library and gets along wonderfully with her classmates. Always helping others, very kind-hearted. A truly outstanding student. She's planning to apply for grad school, but of course there are financial concerns. He looked at me, eyes full of hope. You could tell he was one of the good ones. An educator who actually cared, who went the extra mile to open doors for kids who'd had none. Students like Kathy from modest backgrounds were lucky to have someone like him in their corner. Well, I said, giving him a warm nod, how about we meet Kathy? If she's truly as impressive as you say, we'd be more than happy to consider further support. Oh yes, of course. She should be in the library right now. Let me call her. He stepped aside to make the call. A few moments later he returned looking apologetic. I'm sorry, she says she's not feeling well and took a sick day. Would it be possible to reschedule for another time? She's sick, I said, glancing at Vivian. Well then maybe we should visit her in the hospital. We're free today. Would that be inconvenient for you, Professor Jones? No, of course not. I'd be glad to come along. He quickly informed the office staff of his plans and double-checked Kathy's location, then we all headed out. The entire ride, Professor Jones kept singing Kathy's praises. How selfless she was, how sincere, how remarkable her character had been. Vivian kept opening her mouth to throw in a comment, but each time I reached out to stop her. Not yet. When we finally reached the hospital and pushed open the door to the room, Kathy was lying pale-faced in bed, clearly alone. Dennis, ever the coward, had already made himself scarce. Kathy, Professor Jones said kindly, this is Mrs. Lucy Howard, Mr. Dennis Howard's wife and the co-founder of the Scholarship Fund. When she heard about your situation, she insisted on coming to see you. I know you've been dreaming of applying to MIT for grad school, right? Kathy's face drained of the little color it had left. Her hands trembled slightly. She could barely hide the fear and silent pleading in her eyes. All that arrogance she'd shown at my doorstep was gone. Kathy, I said, tilting my head. What's wrong? You look terrible. I just have a cold, she stammered, clutching the blanket and pulling it higher until it covered her stomach. A slight fever. I'll be fine in a couple days. A cold and fever? Vivian stepped forward, eyebrows raised. That's strange. This whole floor is marked OB-1. She poked her head out into the hallway, then turned back into the room. Yep. Maternity ward. Big signs and everything. Professor Jones followed, curious. He peeked out too, and the change in his face was immediate. Kathy bit down on her lip, hard enough to turn it white. The hospital said the respiratory unit was full, she muttered. So they put me here temporarily. Really? Vivian said loudly with exaggerated concern. They're putting contagious patients on the same floor as newborns and pregnant women? That seems wildly irresponsible. Her voice echoed down the corridor. The door had swung half open behind us. Every word carried. The moment the other families in the hallway overheard someone with a fever and flu was housed in the maternity wing, they swarmed like a flock of alarmed birds. Why the hell is someone with the flu in our ward? My baby was premature. What if she catches something? Are they seriously mixing sick patients with newborns? A young nurse, sweating bullets, scrambled to keep things from spiraling out of control. This floor was the VIP wing. Every patient was someone who could make her life miserable. No, there must be a misunderstanding. The woman in room 333 is here for prenatal care. She went through all the standard screenings before being admitted. There's no infection, I swear. Prenatal care? Vivian gasped with exaggerated shock. You sure about that? He's just a student, a kid. How could she possibly be here for prenatal care? Are you making this up to shut us up? You better not be feeding us lies. She wasn't shouting, but her voice was loud enough to carry all the way down the corridor, just enough for every curious ear to latch onto the juicy bits. Professor Jones stood frozen in the doorway like he'd just been hit by a bus. Meanwhile, I was calmly seated beside Kathy's bed, watching the color drain from her face. Fear turned to pleading. Pleading turned to desperation. And desperation slowly twisted into something darker. Hatred. Kathy, I said evenly, what's going on here? Professor Jones's face was now ashen, his jaw clenched. Professor. I was raped, Kathy stammered, tears flooding down her face before the sentence was even finished. I didn't want to tell anyone. Rape. Professor Jones's face went crimson with fury. That's it, I'm calling the police. He snatched up his phone, hands trembling. 911? This is Professor Jones. One of my students has just disclosed she was raped. We're at City General, room 333. Please send someone immediately. No. Professor, please don't. Kathy cried, suddenly shrinking into herself. I don't want anyone to know. She looked like a delicate flower caught in a storm, all wilted fragility and trembling innocence. Kathy, will be discreet, but if you've been assaulted, you must report it. The law is here to protect you. Professor Jones patted her hand, then walked out to make a follow-up call. What are you all trying to do? Kathy turned to us, her wide eyes filling with a mix of fury and dread. Justice, I said, gently patting her hand. Why can't you just leave me alone? She whispered. We love each other. What? I blinked. You're saying you and your rapist are in love? My God. Are you seriously suffering from Stockholm Syndrome? Vivian nodded solemnly and raised her voice slightly for the benefit of the nosy hallway crowd. Stockholm Syndrome is a psychological condition, she said, where the victim begins to sympathize with their abuser. Over time they may even feel affection, loyalty, or romantic attachment to them. What we're witnessing here is a textbook case. Right on cue, whispers erupted beyond the door. Did you hear? The girl in room 333, raped and now she's lost it. Isn't she here for prenatal care? She wants to keep the rapist's baby? Wow. They're saying she fell in love with the guy. Stockholm Syndrome, no joke. Who's that woman inside with her? Dunno, a professor or someone. Looks important. The officers arrived quickly. One of them, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, nodded at Professor Jones, who immediately stepped forward. I'm the one who made the call, he said. Here's what happened. He laid out everything he knew. A female officer stayed behind to question Kathy privately, but didn't get much. Kathy kept crying and mumbling incoherently. Sir, the officer told me, Miss Kathy here just told me she's in love with the man who allegedly assaulted her. I've recorded the conversation. I pulled out my phone. Here's a recording of her saying the same thing. The officer took it, nodding grimly. They logged my ID and collected the file as evidence. She's been through serious trauma, the officer added. It's possible her judgment is impaired. Professor Jones clutched the officer's arm. You have to catch the bastard. Promise me you won't let him walk away. We won't, the officer said solemnly. We'll wait until Kathy's stable, then we'll collect a sample for a DNA test. We'll find him, sir. No one's above the law. He gave Professor Jones a firm handshake. When we stepped back into the room, Kathy was still crying. Tears streamed down her face as she typed furiously on her phone. Professor Jones sat beside her, murmuring comforts, rubbing her shoulder gently. Eventually she quieted down. That's when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of hurried footsteps outside the room. So that's what the frantic texting was about. Calling in reinforcements. Lucy. Dennis hadn't even reached the hospital room yet, and he was already shouting down the hall. The rapist had arrived. Sometimes I genuinely worried about his IQ. Professor Jones, hearing the voice of the Scholarship Fund's co-founder, leapt to his feet and hurried to the hallway with me. Darling, you're here. I greeted Dennis with an uncharacteristic warmth, looping my arm through his, even though the smell of stale cologne and cheap whiskey made my stomach churn. The professor was just telling me about a truly remarkable student, I chirped sweetly. Poor girl's been through something terrible, assaulted and too frightened to speak up. I already offered her legal aid and I think we should create a new sponsorship plan just for her. She has so much potential. You came at the perfect time. Dennis blinked, clearly dazed by the sudden change in my tone. He wasn't used to warmth from me anymore, especially not with witnesses. Mr. Howard, this is Kathy, Professor Jones added, his voice thick with emotion. She's innocent in all this. A bright, dedicated student. It's just heartbreaking what's happened to her. He removed his glasses to wipe his eyes, clearly moved. I gave Dennis's arm a little shake, dabbing theatrically at the corner of my eye. Let's help her, Dennis, I said with a soft, tremulous voice. No tears, of course. I wasn't that committed. Dennis looked terrified. Rightfully so. The trap was closing. Piece by piece, with just the right tone, the right words, the scene unfolded in front of him. He finally caught on to the narrative. And he did not like it. The realization that he had just been publicly framed as a rapist spread across his face in stages. Confusion, denial, then full-blown panic. And Kathy, I added gently, everyone wants to help you. It's just, this child, he's the son of a rapist. Do you really want to bring him into the world? That could ruin your future. And the child will grow up suffering, always burdened with the truth of his origin. It's not too late, you still have time. What the hell is wrong with you? Dennis snapped, his face going gray. It's her decision, not yours. Dennis. I gasped, my tone innocent and betrayed. What are you saying? Kathy, she's just a victim. Professor Jones cut me off, righteous fury etched on his face. Mr. Howard, he said sharply, Kathy is a student. A child. It's our duty to protect her from making irreversible mistakes. Dennis was shaking. His chest heaved, fists clenched. He was about 2 heartbeats away from exploding. And don't forget, I added sweetly, the police already said they'll collect a DNA sample from the baby to help identify the rapist. That's a wonderful step toward justice, isn't it? Dennis's eyes locked on mine, wide and burning with rage. Vivian stepped forward, reciting like a courtroom oracle. According to state criminal code, rape is defined as non-consensual intercourse involving force, threat, or coercion. The penalty ranges from 3 to 10 years in prison. Aggravating circumstances may result in sentences exceeding 10 years, including life in prison, or even the death penalty. And that was the final trigger. Dennis lunged toward Kathy's bed and grabbed her by the hair. Say it. Tell them when the hell I ever raped you. Perfect. Even better than I'd imagined. No, it's not like that. I didn't mean it. They made me say it. Kathy sobbed, clutching Dennis's wrist, her tears streaming. What? You and Kathy? I staggered back, catching myself against the wall, feigning devastation. Tears poured down my cheeks. Not real, of course. But it looked convincing enough. Even I almost slipped into believing myself. Kathy? You. Professor Jones clutched his chest, going pale as chalk. No, Dennis, tell me it's not true. I screamed, grabbing his shoulders, shaking him violently. Tell me that baby isn't yours. Tell me you're not a rapist. All the pain I'd buried for years, the humiliation, the betrayal, the silence, crashed to the surface in that moment. My screams were real. My fury was real. My performance was lethal. Dennis still had Kathy by the hair, and every time I shook him, her head jerked along with him. Kathy whimpered, too overwhelmed to speak, just clinging to his wrist as her pale face contorted in pain. Dennis snapped. His free hand flew toward me. He was going to hit me. But I was ready. As his arms swung forward, I staggered back, pretending to lose my balance, and yanked on the waistband of his pants. Then I dropped. Right onto the floor, hard enough to bruise. A perfect, pitiful heap. Gasps rang out from the doorway. Today Dennis was wearing sweatpants. So when I yanked him mid-lunge, his leopard print underwear and pale, sagging backside were suddenly on full display. Gasps echoed around the room. I burst into tears, dramatically pointing at him with a trembling hand. How could you do this to me? How could you? After all these years I've worried about you, about the child. What did I ever do to deserve this? You both betrayed me like this. Dennis, momentarily stunned, scrambled to pull his pants up, fumbling with them like a sitcom villain caught mid-affair. Vivian, ever efficient, had already nudged the hospital room door wide open. The camera on her phone recorded everything, from the tearful breakdown to Dennis's hairy humiliation. In the hallway, nurses and curious onlookers had gathered, eyes wide. Oh my God. That's the guy who funds the scholarship program. Did you hear what she said? The girl was willing. Ugh, he's gotta be in his 40s. That's disgusting. Excuse me, officer. I was the one who filed the initial report, Vivian said smoothly, stepping forward. We now have visual confirmation that this incident may be related to the assault. Here's the footage. What rapist? What are you people talking about? Dennis's father, Lucas, stormed into the room, his face flushed with outrage. He'd come for a grandson but was now watching his legacy unravel. There's clearly been a misunderstanding. Lucas stammered, forcing a smile. We're good people. We've donated to help underprivileged students for years. Sir, said the officer calmly, please have a seat. We'll conduct a full investigation. If your son is innocent, that will come to light. But if he isn't, he will be held accountable. Lucas blanched. This is all a family matter. This woman, is just trying to blackmail us because we have money. She's slandering my son. He turned to Kathy, fists clenched, lunging toward her. 2 officers stepped in immediately, pushing him back. Sir, you're interfering with a police investigation. Please sit down. This is a private family issue. What right do you have to interfere? Lucas shouted, trying again to wave the cops away. This is your second warning, Vivian said calmly, stepping forward. Under the law, obstructing a police officer in the execution of their duties is subject to a fine and up to 10 days in custody. Shall I go on? Lucas opened his mouth again, then shut it. He slumped into the nearest chair, glaring daggers at Kathy. Since Kathy was unfit to move, the police took her statement right there in the room. I sobbed, shaking, detailing everything from the beginning. His betrayal, the abuse, the spiral. My performance was so convincing I nearly passed out from how real it felt. Dennis clenched his jaw so tightly I thought his molars might shatter. But with 2 uniformed officers in the room, he didn't dare say much. Professor Jones sat slumped in the corner, utterly deflated. The brilliant scholarship student he'd defended so proudly had turned out to be a mistress, a liar, and a grenade tossed straight into someone else's marriage. Eventually, under questioning, the truth unraveled. Dennis had been having an affair with Kathy, the same student he sponsored. Kathy was 4 months pregnant and had fabricated the rape story to protect her reputation and future plans. When Dennis's wife discovered the affair, he lost control and assaulted both her and Kathy in a rage. A domestic scandal now dressed up in criminal charges. The curtain finally fell. I stood up, wiped my eyes and tossed the divorce agreement onto Dennis's lap. Sign it. The cops had left. Only silence remained. His arrogance was gone. The affair was out. The violence was documented. The only thing left for him to fight over was the money. I don't have any, he spat. All I've got is debt. Take another look at the agreement, I said calmly. He skimmed the document. Vivian had revised it exactly as I instructed. Dennis Howard would not be responsible for child support. I, Lucy Howard, would make no claim to any assets under his name. I would also bear no responsibility for any marital debts incurred during our marriage. Dennis chuckled bitterly and shot me a triumphant look, like he'd just won a prize I didn't know I was competing for. Don't come crawling back, he warned. You'll regret this. I smiled. You've said that before. He signed it with a flourish. Vivian reviewed it, nodded. We agreed to finalize everything at the courthouse at 9:30 the next morning. It was done. All the paperwork was finalized quickly. I moved back in with my parents. Angela, having been mostly raised by my mother and me from the beginning, adjusted to life without her father surprisingly well. There was a brief ripple of scandal online about Kathy, but the university swept it under the rug before it could grow legs. Moving day had its own little drama. Dennis's mother tried to take my jewelry, literally opened my safe without permission. Too bad for her, I'd already changed the combination. When she couldn't open it, she tried to carry the whole damn thing out. Unfortunately for her, the safe was heavier than it looked. It dropped on her foot, shattering the bones clean through. To make matters worse, Anna's a diabetic. Whether or not they'd be able to save the foot, well, that's up to fate now. Dennis and his dad hired a nurse for her, dropped her off at the hospital and haven't checked in since. When I told my mom, she rolled her eyes. Your father and I were blind, she scoffed. Thought that woman was decent. Turns out she's just a first-rate actress. Always moaning about her ailments. Well, she got what she wanted now. It's fine, Mom, I said. We're moving into the new house in a few days. You think they'll come looking for trouble? That woman was so stingy, she tore paper towels in half to make them last longer. They won't come back. She glanced at me, suspicious but silent. Whatever you choose from now on, she finally said, your father and I support you. Fully. You're never alone. Thank you, I whispered. What they didn't know was, I'd already signed with a new publishing house. I was now a full-time author. Writing novels on schedule gave me consistent income. My days were growing calmer, steadier, freer. Sweetheart, the investigation's underway, Vivian told me one afternoon over coffee. Should be making headlines in a few days. Solid evidence? I asked. Rock solid. Trust me. I smiled. Dennis had spent years living recklessly, convinced he'd never face consequences. Their auto repair business had grown big, not just because of skill but because of shortcuts, fraud, and backroom deals. They cut corners, sold shoddy work, laundered money with crooked officials, buried competitors using every dirty trick in the book. Every single act, enough to send him away. How long, you think? Minimum 3 years if he's lucky. 3 years. That's it? After he stole 7 years of my life. I laughed. 7 years of my youth and he gets off with 3 in minimum security? What about Kathy? The photo's been sent. It should blow up any day now. Kathy had once sent me a hotel photo with her and Dennis, trying to provoke me. What she hadn't noticed was the bottom of the curtain, where a pair of another man's feet in slippers was visible. I'd been saving that one. You sent it exactly how I asked? Exactly, Vivian confirmed. Blown up. Printed. Red circle around the slippers. Then I had someone tip Dennis off while Kathy was with that guy. He caught them in the act. I nodded in approval. And she's been expelled? Long ago. She's decided to keep the baby. But word is, Dennis doesn't want to marry her. His parents just want the baby. And Kathy agreed? Oh, she agreed. Supposedly for 100,000. The deal is, have the baby do the paternity test. The man in the hotel photo? That was her high school sweetheart. He funded her schooling for years. But once Kathy got into college and developed a taste for flash, he couldn't keep up. He turned to gambling to make ends meet. Kathy dumped him. Then she latched onto Dennis. I listened in silence as Vivian laid it all out. So much of life, I realized, comes down to personal choice. Some people chase power. Some chase love. Some chase shortcuts. I was done chasing anything. And I sure as hell was done looking back. After moving into our new home, life felt like it had finally hit the reset button. Angela settled into her new school with ease. She made friends quickly and every day she came home beaming with joy. Mommy, she'd say often, our new house is so pretty. So warm. Watching her laugh like that, I felt something inside me slowly healing. I was regaining strength I hadn't realized I'd lost. Vivian stayed on top of Dennis's financial crime case, tracking every development. 6 months later he was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. His assets were seized to pay off debts. As for Kathy, after giving birth, the paternity test revealed the baby wasn't Dennis's. The news shattered her. Dennis's family turned on her instantly, treating her like a plague. Her own parents, drained by the scandal and unable to support her anymore, took her and the baby back to the countryside. She disappeared from our lives for good. Me. I returned to writing. This time pouring my truth into every page. I focused on stories about women and families, about heartbreak and rebirth. My first novel, inspired by the ruins of my marriage and the story of how I rebuilt myself, took off within months. It became a bestseller. The film rights sold almost immediately. Suddenly, I was a full-time author with a steady income and full financial independence. Vivian remained my rock. She stopped by often, reviewing contracts, catching up over tea, swapping gossip. Angela took to calling her Mommy Vivian, a nickname that melted us both. Sometimes I think, if not for Vivian, I might never have made it out of the darkness. With the royalties from my books, I bought my parents a little house outside the city. A warm cottage surrounded by flowers and fruit trees. Angela loved racing through the garden after school, barefoot and free. And sometimes late at night when the world is quiet and still, I think about that 2 a.m. text from a stranger. If not for that message, I might have stayed in that sinking marriage, drowning quietly for years. Feels like everything came full circle. Every wound, every betrayal, every lie. All of it pushed me into a better life. Goodbye, Dennis. Goodbye, past. I'm finally free.